I want to turn now to our chief White House correspondent, Major Garrett. He's in Riyadh. He has been traveling with the president. Major, good morning. What can you tell us?
Well, on this question that you laid before your panel, Rena, what is the net result of Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric now that he's the 45th president of the United States? Let me give you first the White House appraisal based on what it's experiencing here at Riyadh with this Arab Islamic American summit. White House advisors tell us, look, if Donald Trump had a real prolonged problem with the Islamic world, 40 nations or more would not be represented here in Riyadh for this summit, which has two principal goals: being a military counterbalance to the influence of Iran in the region, and to pull together resources and attitudes, importantly, against Islamic extremism or Islamic-influenced terrorism. Now, from the White House's perspective, if in fact the rhetoric of Donald Trump was so corrosive, these Islamic leaders and Arab leaders would not be here. And it's important to note that they're not the same. Arab and Islamic leaders are not the same. In some cases they are, but in some cases they aren't. Either way, leaders from more than 40 nations are here. And what the United States, from the White House perspective, is trying to achieve is a new dialogue about confronting extremism, the roots of it, and its application through terrorism. Now, one of the counterweights to that is that this administration, quite clearly in the Middle East, is no longer emphasizing democracy or human rights as ultimate priorities of American policy. The priorities of this administration are security and commerce. Democracy and human rights take a backseat to those. And for many leaders in this region, that's a welcome turn in American policy. Why? Because it gives them far more latitude to describe who terrorists are in their country and to treat human rights the way they're comfortable with, not as the American democratic system might be comfortable with. And in his speech today, the president said, we'll say, because we've seen excerpts, we don't come here to lecture you. We don't come here to tell you how to run your countries or operate your systems. For many in the region, like Egyptian leader al-Sisi, who has arrested thousands of people and carried out a very aggressive military campaign against what he describes as terrorist influences in that country, in Saudi Arabia here, where there is also a very quite different and much more limited definition of human rights, and certainly no definition of democracy, and in other nations around the region, that hands-off approach on democracy and human rights, welcome. And that's one of the reasons so many Arab and Islamic leaders are here, because they do sense a new dialogue with America, one much more built around security and commerce, and not those other issues that during the Obama administration years caused some noticeable degree of division between the United States and many nations in this region.
Yeah, many of those Arab leaders did not like the White House, the Obama administration pushing so hard on those measures, but the White House then felt very strongly about it. Major, I want to ask you about the terminology here. We know that the Trump administration has often used, President Trump has used the term radical Islamic terrorism. We understand from the excerpts he's going to be saying Islamist extremism. Is there a difference, Major?
Well, that's going to be up for the audience here to decide, and how this entire trip will be interpreted after it ends. This first trip by this American president, not as most American presidents in the Common Era have done, to Canada or Mexico, but to Saudi Arabia, the custodian of the two holiest sites in all of Islam. Though the symbolism of that trip, first of all, and then this reshaping and softening and sanding down, if you will, of that harsh campaign rhetoric will also be sifted, not just by leaders who come here for this summit, but by all those in their countries who are trying to gauge what is the approach of this new American president. It's worth noting that during the campaign, then candidate Trump mocked Hillary Clinton, mocked President Obama, mocked every Democrat who he said refused to and didn't have the courage, he often said, to use the words radical Islamic terrorism. Well, now as President of the United States, this president has dialed back that rhetoric for a practical and diplomatically obvious reason. Doing so creates more tension, and it inhibits the ability to achieve either first listenership, then followership, and then possibly cooperation. So even as he has a very long and familiar track record with a certain kind of rhetoric on this question, as president, Donald Trump is using different language.
Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett joining us.